What's going on? This is Theo Greminger, aka the OG Fantasy. You're still watching sleeper videos. Congratulations. You got skin in the game. You're in the fantasy playoffs. You need a win. And maybe things are not going so well for you this week in terms of injuries. Maybe you have Brian Robinson and he was just ruled out. Maybe you were already down bad at running back and now you're looking for somebody to replace Alexander Madison. Maybe, you're still looking to get some running back points off teams where you had Isaiah Pacheco. And then maybe you have CJ Stroud or Justin Herbert, and you're looking for a quarterback option. And maybe you have Tyreek Hill, and you think Tyreek's going to play, but I need some options to add in case he doesn't, or a player to stash in case, God forbid, Tyreek Hill can't go in week 16. So the playoffs are here, but we're still looking to improve the quality of our rosters. And then when we get into jam, we're not throwing darts. We're being calculated with our decisions as to who we're replacing our guys with. This is win or go home fantasy football. This is playing for the titles. This is playing for the money. We got to be really good with all of our decisions this week. Let's start out at the quarterback position. And all of the guys I'm going to talk about are available in at least 50% of Yahoo leagues. Most of them are available in a lot more than that. But the first person I want to talk about is Jake Browning. And Jake Browning is available in 55% of Yahoo leagues. He is on a heater. He's had back-to-back top 5 quarterback finishes with 629 passing yards and 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games combined. He's also added 2 rushing touchdowns. Jamar Chase had the big blow-up game with Browning in week 13. T. Higgins is finally healthy. And the Joe Mixon-Chase Brown combination is giving the Bengals some of their best running back production of the entire season. So if you lost Justin Herbert or CJ Stroud, I think Jake Browning, if he's still available to you, is a must-add. He could be a life preserver for you in the fantasy playoffs, despite the tricky matchup against an underrated Minnesota Vikings defense. And I think this Minnesota Vikings defense doesn't get a whole lot of credit. They just shut the Raiders completely out. I think that this is still a game where Jake Browning could be considered a high-end QB2 with obvious upside to get into that mid QB1 level. The next quarterback is Will Levis. Now, Will Levis is one that's kind of difficult to get excited about on a weekly basis. But last week, he had a quarterback 15 finish. And this was his second highest finish of the season for any given week. And he had 327 passing yards. This was a career high. And you get all sorts of good vibes with this Tennessee team right now. They care. They were down big to Miami. We've seen a lot of teams get down big to Miami this year, and that's all she wrote. Miami rips off a long touchdown run, and all of a sudden the team's down 21 points, ball game. Tennessee came back and won. It was a tremendous comeback. And you had Will Levis connecting with DeAndre Hopkins. That connection looks real. I like Will Levis this week as like a little bit lower end streaming option than Browning for sure, but Browning's rostered in a ton of leagues. Will Levis is still available in 80% of Yahoo leagues. This week, they go up against a Houston Texans defense that is reeling. Houston Texans just gave up a 30-point performance to the New York Jets. And what's crazy is this Houston Texans defense has just been getting shredded by opposing quarterbacks lately. In the second half of the season alone, the Texans have allowed Jake Browning to pass for 347 yards, Trevor Lawrence passed for 364 yards, Derek Carr passed for 353 yards, and then Zach Wilson, who had been benched for weeks and weeks, passes for 301 yards in his second game back. So all of those quarterbacks exceeded 300 passing yards. Levis could be a sneaky streamer if you're in a really tough spot. Another quarterback, if you're in a tough spot, is Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco is available to you in 78% of Yahoo leagues. The Bears defense has been getting a lot of pressure on opposing quarterbacks. This is a sneaky matchup, but the passing volume for Joe Flacco gives him sort of a relatively safe fantasy floor. If you're a super flex manager, you're excited about Joe Flacco this week in your QB2 spot. Over his past 2 games, Flacco has 89 pass attempts. He passed for 5 touchdowns in his last 2 games. And one of the craziest stats of the season, Joe Flacco, 311 passing yards in week 14, his highest passing total since 2018. Wild times. Getting over to the running back position. Now, I don't have as many names this week at the running back spot as I do usually in these videos because I'm talking to less people and there's less people to compete with on the waiver wire. But obviously at the top of the running back spot, when one door closes, one door opens in the NFL and in fantasy football. And this looks like a Ty Chandler week. Ty Chandler is available in 66% of Yahoo leagues. And if you're watching this video on a Friday, he's going to be available to you. But if you watch this video on a Sunday, everybody's going to scoop him up. So hopefully you watch this video early enough. Ty Chandler is rostered in a lot of leagues, but again, still available in 66% of Yahoo leagues. Ty Chandler was my number 1 waiver wire recommendation this week on playerprofiler.com and in my waiver wire video. But Madison's going to miss, and Chandler's in like a great spot. He should be involved as a runner and as a receiver and see 15 to 20 touches. And, you know, every season you get these random running backs whose production just goes wild in the fantasy playoffs. If you can remember a few years back, the Rashad Penny, series of playoff games where he just went absolutely bonkers. If you can recall the Devin Singletary, where he went absolutely nuts in the fantasy playoffs. Last year, this time of year, we had a random week 15, not like, that random. The guy finishes an RB2, but you had like a 35-point week from Jerick McKinnon in week 15. So every year you get these running backs that elevate themselves in the fantasy playoffs. And the one word for it, opportunity. Chandler's going to have the opportunity as a runner and as a receiver. He's already given you 2 RB2 weeks this season, and he played in over 80% of the running back snaps when Alexander Mattison left last week's game. Look for Chandler to maybe have his most productive game of the season in week 1 of the fantasy playoffs. The writing is on the wall. This is a Ty Chandler week. Go grab him if available. The other running back, and this guy's not going to get as many touches, but he looks like he's been shot out of a cannon every time he touches the football, and that's Chase Brown. Chase Brown looks nasty. We have a small sample size for Chase Brown, but he has been a revelation the last 2 weeks. He's looked explosive in the Bengals backfield as a complement to Joe Mixon. He runs a low 4.4 speed, and that really shows when you watch him on film. And in week 13, we saw it with a running play where Chase Brown ripped off a 31-yard run. Then last week, it got even better, where Chase Brown showed off his wheels once again, but this was on the opening drive of the game for Cincinnati. He ends up with a 61-yard touchdown on a screen pass. On that same play, he was clocked in with the second fastest miles per hour time of any player in the league at any time this season, right behind DK Metcalf. So like he's like a big time athlete, and he's getting opportunities. The volume could be unpredictable. If I'm in a jam though in the fantasy playoffs and I have the opportunity to use Chase Brown and I'm like an underdog and I'm need a high ceiling guy that could do it on a couple of plays, think of him sort of like a Keaton Mitchell type for the Cincinnati Bengals. Like there probably won't be more than 10 touches. But if he gets those 10 touches and some of them are receptions, Chase Brown could help you get through the week. If I'm desperate in the RB2 or the flex spot, I'm absolutely happy to use Chase Brown because at least he gives me upside. Another player who's available in 61% of Yahoo leagues is Jerick McKinnon. And now it's going to be a split. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be involved as well, which is a little bit unexciting to use these guys in a true split because you can't always predict what's going on. But McKinnon feels like the player with the most upside this week. In week 14, McKinnon ran for a touchdown. He also had 3 catches. He has 4 touchdowns on the season in pretty much limited opportunities. The Chiefs' offense has scored less than 20 points in 3 of their last 4 games. So if I'm Andy Reid and Matt Nagy and the Kansas City Chiefs, and I have no Isaiah Pacheco, and I'm sort of reeling here. I lost to Green Bay. I lost to Buffalo. I'm not scoring. Then I'm going to do a little self-scouting, and I'm going to look to get Jerick McKinnon more involved early as a receiver. Takes a lot of pressure off of Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice, and takes a lot of pressure off of Patrick Mahomes when he gets Jerick McKinnon involved early in the first quarter. So I think McKinnon could be a sneaky play if you are jammed this week. And again, he's available in 61% of Yahoo leagues. Going over to the tight end position, my favorite tight end streamer this week, especially for people that are in deep leagues and need a low rostered player, Tucker Kraft. Tucker Kraft is gaining momentum heading into the fantasy playoffs. Last week in Green Bay's loss to New York, Kraft posted a career high of 64 receiving yards and 4 catches. In week 13, he had a career high in targets with 6. It sort of feels like a big game could be coming up on the radar for Kraft. With multiple wide receiver injuries, he could see increased usage this week. This is a must-win game for Green Bay against Tampa Bay. I think Tucker Kraft is a high-end tight end 2 this week. Don't be surprised if he sets another career high this week, whether it's targets, catches, or yards. He's definitely a player this week. If I'm in a jam, I'm considering. Chig Okonkwo. And this one is yo, Theo, Chig is not doing it this year. He hasn't gone over 50 yards in any game. And I get it. But there's some intriguing things with Chig Okonkwo. We talked about Will Levis. We talked about the generous nature of the Houston Texans secondary lately. Chig Okonkwo is not blowing up, but he's had at least 5 targets and at least 45 receiving yards over his last 3 games. He's not gone over 50 yards in the season in any game, but if you're desperate, I think he's going to get enough opportunities in this game that maybe he breaks off a touchdown or a big play and pushes his production up on a single play. He should see about a 15% target share or more. You know that's coming. And again, it's a generous secondary. And I think Houston's also got to be very aware of Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry has been an absolute tear. So look for Chig Okonkwo also in the play action passing game. Going over to the wide receiver position. So at the wide receiver spot, you've got at the top for me is Zay Jones. And Zay Jones available in 70% of Yahoo leagues. You have the Baltimore Ravens going into Jacksonville. And the Baltimore Ravens have been one of the more productive fantasy defenses in the league all season. But lately, it's not been quite as dominant. They just gave up 3 touchdown passes to Matt Stafford last week. And I think Zay Jones this week, if I'm in a bind and I need a flex play or a wide receiver 3 play, I don't mind using Zay. And it's not because of his production last week. His production last week was uninspiring. He had 5 catches for 29 yards, but his usage was very inspiring. He's targeted 14 times. That easily led the team. And he's been the biggest beneficiary of Christian Kirk's injury. So in week 13, Zay Jones had 5 catches for 78 yards. He was also targeted 8 times that week. So in back-to-back games, he has combined for 22 targets. That's big time. And they don't call him Big Play Zay for a reason. Trevor Lawrence in a game like this against Baltimore is going to be looking for Zay Jones in the end zone at some point. He comes up with a touchdown catch with this sort of target volume, somewhere between, I think 8 is a reasonable number. Don't expect a 14 target game, but if he gets you an 8 target week, maybe a 9 target week, potential to catch a touchdown, this is exactly the kind of guy you want to be putting in your flex spot. Another player in a game that we're going to be chasing is the Washington-LA game has a 50.5 point total, one of the highest totals on the board. And Washington's coming off of their bye week. Curtis Samuel has 165 combined receiving yards over his last 2 games played. Washington and the Rams, again, have this high total where you don't have to worry about some low-scoring game where it's going to sink everybody. So Samuel is going to be involved on low ADOT looks around the line of scrimmage to take the pressure off of Sam Howell the most sacked quarterback in the NFL right now. And Samuel could also see some increased rushing attempts with Brian Robinson questionable to play. So I like Curtis Samuel this week. And then we also have to talk about Wan'Dale Robinson. And unlike Zay Jones and Curtis Samuel, Wan'Dale Robinson is available in 89% of Yahoo leagues. So Robinson had his best game of the season in New York's win over Green Bay. And I had talked about in previous sleeper videos and my waiver wire that I thought Jalen Hyatt was going to be a post-bye week winner. And I was very wrong on that. Wan'Dale Robinson, it's funny because I was on Wan'Dale a lot earlier in the year, but Jalen Hyatt had that big game against New England, and I thought that this was going to continue as the season moved along. It's Robinson, though. This was obviously game planned for to get Robinson involved against Green Bay. And we have to remember, Robinson was New York's second-round pick in 2021. He was heading towards a very strong end of the season, then gets injured. Finally looks like Wan'Dale Robinson's back to his old self. He had a 32-yard reception, a 32-yard run. He had 115 combined yards. His 9 targets were a season high. New York has a difficult matchup this week on the road against New Orleans, but Robinson is still an intriguing dart throw if you're scrambling at the wide receiver 3 or flex spot. Now, if you're really in a jam, this player is available in 94% of Yahoo leagues, and that's Demarcus Robinson of the LA Rams. Robinson, if you recall, like last year, I would continually talk about him on my waiver wire videos and my waiver wire articles because Robinson was seeing an uptick in usage in Baltimore, and he randomly had all these like decent weeks with Lamar Jackson and later on with Tyler Huntley when Baltimore was decimated at the wide receiver position. Demarcus Robinson bounces around, and now he's on the LA Rams. He scored touchdowns in back-to-back weeks, and Tutu Atwell looks like he's going to miss another game. So look for Robinson to slot right in next to Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, and Washington has conceded the most passing yards in football. So this game has the high total, the terrible secondary. If I'm in a situation and I'm in a complete bind and I don't have any other options, Demarcus Robinson is a very reasonable dart throw. You've got to figure Washington's going to try to sell out against Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Robinson could have advantageous matchups all game long, and he could continue his strong play. You also have Kyron Williams going nuts every week. So hopefully this helped you out. Make sure you check out my Sleepers article on playerprofiler.com. Check out all of my written work at playerprofiler.com. Check out the other videos like this that I'm dropping throughout the week. And check out my podcasts, and they're all here as well. Check out Press Coverage with Andrew Cooper this week. Future Cast with Matty Kiwoom and our guest Cody Carpenter. We did a Dynasty rookie mock draft. Check out Dynasty Life with Alan Soslowski. Find me every week right here on Player Profiler and First Class Fantasy with Billy Muzio. I'm Theo Greminger. You can follow me on Twitter at the OG Fantasy. And let's get after it. This is the time of year. Let's win some titles. Let's win our league. Let's win some money. Let's have a happy holidays and enjoy your weekend.